Greetings once again, dear colleagues. I'm happy to see you all. Yesterday we had our first day of the conference. It was a success and it was full of fascinating reports and speeches. I would like to thank all the speakers who presented their materials yesterday. I would like to thank our interpreters. I would like to thank everyone who contributed to it. Today, we have our second day of the conference. I'm happy to see you all here, and I would like to start our day with a fascinating topic that is building resilience through language education and culture. This roundtable will be moderated by Roman Ivashkiv, professor of Slavic Studies at University of Alabama. I would like to say that this roundtable is organized by faculty and colleagues from the International Association of Teachers of the Ukrainian language, and I'm happy to pass on to Roman. Dear colleagues, friends, greetings everyone. I'm honored to moderate this roundtable. If you don't mind, I would like to start with the words of gratitude to the organizers. I would like to thank Indiana University and I would like to thank Svetlana Melnik in particular. There is an immense amount of work behind this conference, and we are happy to have this platform for exchange. And if you don't mind, I would like to start our today's panel with minute silence to commemorate those who perished defending Ukraine and also to commemorate all those innocent people who died in Ukraine. Our children, our grandchildren, their future is protected by those who are sacrificing their lives right now. Thank you. And if you don't mind, we have simultaneous interpretation, and I would like to switch to English.
Or in case we're running out of time, I should be able to condense my own presentation. And then I would like to request that all the presenters stick to the 15-minute time limit. I would really not like to cut anybody off, so I would be trying my best to let everybody finish. But I also want us to be aware of the fact that the discussion that's going to follow our presentations is probably even more important than the presentations themselves. So it's important to leave some time at the end for questions. For everybody who's not presenting, I would also kindly request that you mute your microphones so that there's no distractions. Also, please be aware that this event is being simultaneously interpreted into, if you present in Ukrainian, it'll be done into English. So please be mindful and be aware that the interpreters are working very hard to do this. It's an incredibly difficult job. And without further ado, I would like to introduce our first presenter, Dr. Marina Kapas-Romaniuk. She is a visiting researcher at University of York in the United Kingdom, and also Researchers at Risk Fellow at the British Academy. a co-investigator in an Economic and Social Research Council, ESRC, a project entitled Multilingualism in Situations of Conflict. After the full Russian invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, Marina and her 7-year-old son were forced to leave Ukraine and came to the UK in April 2022. Then in June, Marina joined the University of York as a tutor in the Ukrainian language. She studied the Ukrainian language at the Taras Shevchenko National University in Kyiv, where she obtained a BA and MA honors degrees, qualifying as a teacher of higher education, and then completed a PhD in the Ukrainian language. Marina worked as an assistant professor in a range of Taras Shevchenko University's departments in Kyiv. Pani Marina, welcome. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much for introducing. Hello, everyone. Hello, dear colleagues. I'm really appreciate opportunity to be there today. And let's start my presentation. Can you see my screen?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So as Roman mentioned, that project, that preliminary findings of the project I'm going to present to you today, the importance of maintaining Ukrainian proficiency among child refugees, is a part of the bigger project, multilingualism in situations of conflict, that has been firstly supported by the British Academy and then received broader funding by the Economic and Social Research Council. Since the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine, around 254,000 of Ukrainians has arrived in the UK. There were mostly mothers with children. Those children, about 34,000, started attending local schools and acquiring English. This process of acquisition was typically not only very fast, but also accompanied by a deterioration of their Ukrainian. It is unknown to what extent children's Ukrainian language proficiency has been affected, but it is clear that forced child migrants need some support to maintain their Ukrainian proficiency in new language environment. So this is what we are going to talk about today. The main focus will be on two questions: who can provide that support and how? Okay, so let me start by a short, summarized and grouped by trends review of current literature. The problem of maintaining language proficiency in multilingual context is not new, and it is easy to find different sources to be deep in. However, the problem maintaining Ukrainian proficiency among child forced migrants unfortunately remains relevant, painful, and requires an urgent solution while the war in Ukraine continues. Among studies that appeared for the last 3 years, there are some researches that relates to Ukrainian-Russian adult bilingualism and languages of Ukrainian children who have found shelter abroad or stayed in Ukraine. In particular, they are dedicated to language attitudes, language shift, language policies, language family policies, language priorities, choices in education, language consciousness and behavior, language development. Despite the broad interest of researchers in the problems mentioned above, the issue of maintaining the Ukrainian language proficiency among child forced migrants deserves more research attention. In our presentation, we contribute to the topic with the preliminary analysis of qualitative and quantitative data that has been collected between May and December 2023 from 119 participants aged to 17 who came to the UK after the Russian invasion in February 2022. Our data consist of surveys and interviews completed by parents. Also, 100 children aged 6-17 took part in such linguistic experiments as a bilingual picture naming task, a semantic and phonological verbal fluency task, and story retelling task in both Ukrainian and English. Today, we are focusing just on the survey and interviews data. So let's try to answer question: who is responsible of maintenance Ukrainian proficiency and how? On this chart, you can see that it could be parents, could be Ukrainian education system, and also UK-based organization. The first determining factor of maintaining the Ukrainian language in children is communication at home. Family language practices. The entire development of children is usually the effort of the parents. Most parents are aware of need to make efforts to maintain the Ukrainian language of their children. On this slide, you can see the ratio of languages that parents used with their children before the war, use at the time of interview, and languages children use with parents. So we can see that parents increased their use of Ukrainian up to 68%. However, the use of Ukrainian among children is smaller if we compare it with parents. In addition, we also can see that the use of English by children has increased to 8.32%. Some children even refuse to speak Ukrainian or Russian at home. For example, mother addresses a child in Ukrainian and the child responds in English. As I mentioned in an introduction part, the process of acquisition of English is typically not only very fast, but also accompanied by a deterioration of their Ukrainian. What I want to highlight in this chart is nearly 40% of parents reported small changes in Ukrainian since child has arrived in the UK, and nearly 16% reported significant changes. So in total, over 55% of children have some signs of deterioration of Ukrainian after 1 to 1.5 years in the UK. We also asked parents about the languages that important for their children's future. We can see the ratio of nearly equal importance of English and Ukrainian languages. However, 12.45% of parents mentioned that the Russian language will remain important for their children. Here you can see that over 77% of parents reported that they do nothing to maintain Russian proficiency of their children. Those who reported maintenance of the Russian language, it is 22% reported that they speak Russian at home, read Russian books if children ask them, and watched films in Russian. One of the mothers said that her daughter has been offered to study Russian at private school, and they agreed. I would like to show you one quotation from one of the adult interviews. A mother who moved to the UK in 2019, but she and her son lived in Ukraine from time to time, and before the full-scale Russian invasion, they were there. So she has a 5-year-old son who speaks Russian, but he knows that he is from Ukraine, and he always calls himself Ukrainian. He has a classmate, a girl from Ukraine, who has Ukrainian parents and came to the UK just after the full Russian invasion, and she speaks Ukrainian. And that woman told, when my boy plays with that girl and says something to her in Russian, and she sometimes answers him in Ukrainian, and he comes up to me and says, Mom, tell me that I'm Ukrainian, and he speaks Russian. That situation made the lady think about changing family language practices, as it really feels wild that he considered himself Ukrainian but speaks Russian, she mentioned. This brings me to the next point to answer the question how parents can maintain Ukrainian proficiency. It is vital to create and support Ukrainian speaking environment for children inside a family. There should be the presence of the Ukrainian language in children's everyday lives with high quality content such as stories, fairy tales, books, music, videos. Over 21% of parents reported that children read Ukrainian books. Some of them read to younger brothers or sisters. Older children read blogs, Instagram, and different articles on the internet. They also search on the internet in Ukrainian. Some Ukrainian books already appeared in local libraries. Some families avoid switching into English at home. For example, 14% of parents avoid switching into English at home, and only 8.21% of children avoid switching into English at home. They speak just in Ukrainian at home and beyond home with other Ukrainians at Ukrainian local communities, with friends and relatives who stayed in Ukraine. They also play in board games and or computer games in Ukrainian like Minecraft. Meaningful interaction with Ukrainian speakers as much as possible, it is very essential. Relatives who stayed in Ukraine, friends and teachers. One of the parents also reported that they read, write and argue in Ukrainian. All these practices can help children to develop communicating and listening skills. At this point, I would like to stress that over 82% of children are frequently in touch with their other parent. However, some of our child's participants already lost their fathers who had fought to protect Ukraine. We can just imagine how it could impact their language use and maintenance. I must emphasize that for some children, Ukrainian was just the language of education, and they did not speak Ukrainian at home. In fact, those children are currently limited in their access to the Ukrainian language because they study in local schools in the UK, and part of them stop studying in Ukrainian education system. Thus, in Russian-speaking families, it is vital to reduce the influence of the Russian language and follow these steps that can probably improve the situation with the maintaining of the Ukrainian proficiency among these children and could have a positive effect on them. It is necessary to upbring children inside a family with a clear understanding of belonging to Ukraine. Extend use of Ukrainian or switch into Ukrainian with children at home and change their language practices or policies. Help children to stay in the Ukrainian education system by attending different online classes in Ukrainian of the Ukrainian language, history of Ukraine, Ukrainian literature, math, chess, Ukrainian folklore, painting classes. These classes can be held individually or in groups with other children. Form in children a sense of belonging to Ukrainianness, to tell children about bright events from the history of Ukrainian culture, Ukrainian history. Thus, they will be interested in heroic personalities of whom Ukrainians are proud. Then it will surely awaken on children a sense of belonging to Ukrainianness. Let's return to the question, who is responsible of maintaining Ukrainian proficiency? In addition to parents, there are also Ukrainian education system with state or private schools, distance or external studies, online classes, and also UK-based institutions, Saturday schools, Ukrainian communities, UK Department of Education, UK libraries and bookshops. Based on the information presented by the Deputy Minister of Education and Science of Ukraine, Nadia Kuzmachova, during her visit of the International Symposium Ukrainian Education Abroad, Mission and Vision in Lviv last Friday, 2.1 million Ukrainian children are abroad and only 358,000 of them can be seen in the Ukrainian education system. But every year this number is decreasing. There are two reasons of this process. The first is due to the natural exit from the system. We are talking about 11th grades. The second is when a decision is made that the child will study at school in the host country. Earlier, at the beginning of the month, Nadia Kuzmachova also announced launching a unified platform for registering in the Ukrainian studies component. And quotation, parents and students will no longer have to call 148 schools to find out which ones have actual open distance learning classes. Instead, they will simply need to register and choose from institutions that have already been verified before appearing on the platform. Based on our data, over 41% of children attend online classes in Ukrainian education system. Others just continue studying in Ukrainian schools externally and do not attend any classes. However, they do some assessment 1-2 times per year. Attending different online classes in Ukrainian, what I mentioned before, and these classes hold individually or in groups with other children. And 38% of children attend 3-5 hours per week, 25% 1-2 hours, 15% 6-10 hours, 12% more than 10 hours per week, and 7.69% less than an hour per week. Those children who are 12-16 years old already have that core of the Ukrainian language, and the maintaining of their Ukrainian will depend on how much they will read, use language, or develop their Ukrainian proficiency by preparing for exam in Ukrainian like NMT. Unfortunately, currently, some Ukrainian families that have boys reported that they were forced to refuse taking part in such exam. As for them, there will be no options to enter Ukrainian university without registering for military service and issuing military registration documents. To return to Ukraine will mean boys will not be able to leave Ukraine again. The youngest children can probably forget the Ukrainian language very fast if their parents will not take any action to maintain it. They even can have an accent. If a child has arrived in the UK in 1 or 5 years old, how he or she could develop all vital Ukrainian language skills like reading, writing, listening. Just speaking skills will not develop child's language knowledge, abilities to analyze Ukrainian information and to deep into it. One of the mothers reported, "When we left Ukraine, my daughter was 5 years old. She learned to write and read first in English, and then she caught on and learned to read in Ukrainian on her own. Before that, she knew Ukrainian letters." There is also another case when a mother of 3 years old noted that to study English is natural for him. And I would like to share with you some audio example of 3 years old child speaking in English. She speaks 50% of English and 50% of Ukrainian.
Just 1 minute.
And another audio.
Mommy, are you showing? What's
Маска.
a me, Mom?
And this slide should give you a clearer picture of children's ability to read and write in Ukrainian. In average, 77.60% of children aged 6-17 who participated in linguistic experiments can read and write very well in Ukrainian. Based on this data, it is clear that forced child migrants need to have access to good quality education, Ukrainian education, to additional studying in the Ukrainian language. More hours they will spend studying in Ukrainian, better Ukrainian proficiencies they will have. Thus, the Ukrainian language education in the UK should be continued as such competencies like reading, writing need to be developed further and stabilized. It is essential to realize that the Ukrainian language classes for those children should be based on programs developed by the Ministry of Education of Ukraine for children who study in Ukraine, not for children who were born abroad and for whom the Ukrainian language is inherited. If child forced migrants will return to Ukraine, they will need to adjust to Ukrainian education system easily and fast. To prove my previous point, I would like to share with you one quotation from the report of the fourth phase of the study, Ukrainian refugees of the 3 years abroad, how many and who will return, the fourth phase of the research prepared by the Center of Economic Strategy in February 2025. According to this document, children who continue their education in Ukraine schools remotely retain a close connection with the Ukrainian culture, language, and educational system. And last point I would like to mention today is a UK-based organization that can maintain Ukrainian proficiency. In particular, Ukrainian community schools, Saturday schools, help children to be immersed in Ukrainian-speaking environment, cultural, provide trauma recovery support, GCSE support, tutoring session, hold different after-school activities and holiday camps. However, such schools are possible to find only in big cities like London, Manchester, Reading, Leeds. What parents and children from smaller cities or villages should do is unknown. There are some Ukrainian communities and associations that have been created after Ukrainians arrived in the UK. For example, in York, we have York Ukrainian Society and Sunflowers Club for Children. They organize some meeting for Ukrainians, but we cannot say that it is much help with the Ukrainian language maintaining. In particular, the founder of Sunflowers Club was known previously as Russian-speaking lady, and she tolerates the Russian language among parents and children in her club. Some children attend Ukrainian Scout Organization Plus, where everyone speaks just in Ukrainian. It is a good way to maintain communication skills in Ukrainian, but not proficiency. In addition, some parents reported that a lot of Russian-speaking children have joined Plus, and Ukrainian-speaking children did not feel comfortable anymore, as there has been no supported language standards of Plus. Parents also reported that some children aged 15-17 have been offered to take Russian language GCSE exam. It is not appropriate to do as such offer can be painful for many children. Unfortunately, GCSEs in Ukrainian were scrapped in England, whilst in Northern Ireland in 1995 due to the lack of demand. It is, according to the Guardian, Why Should I Study Russian article. Ukraine's education ministry has written to the British Education Secretary to say it is crucial to reintroduce GCSE in Ukrainian. Now in the UK, about 34,000 Ukrainian children, and it would have been great to give them the opportunity to study their mother tongue, preserve their identity, and help them in the future after returning to Ukraine to get access to Ukrainian higher education. Well, that brings me to the end of the presentation. We hope that our preliminary findings indicate that maintaining Ukrainian proficiency among child force migrants is possible to provide following the action that were mentioned today, at a joint effort between parents, the Ukrainian education system, and the UK-based organizations. I don't want to recap that particular actions to save time, and we believe that some of named actions can help not only children who have found shelter in the UK, but also all children who were forced to leave Ukraine after the full-scale Russian invasion or remained in Ukraine. We have still got quite a long way to go. What we need to do next is to analyze experimental and qualitative first set of the data and to collect second set of the data. We are also open to broader discussion and cooperation to disseminate our findings and help practical implementation. Thank you for your attention, and you also can see the references to
Thank
my
you very much.
presentation.
Thank you, Pani Marina.
I'm really sorry that maybe I took a little bit
No
more
worries.
time.
We're still doing okay. Thank you so much for a wonderful, insightful presentation and sharing the experience of the United Kingdom. Extremely important. I forgot to mention at the beginning that we will leave the questions for later. So everybody in the audience, if you do have a question, please use the chat function, or you can just write it down and raise your hand at the end of the roundtable when there's a Q&A, and we will try to monitor who's raising their hands or who has a message in the chat so that we can either allow you to read your question or read it for you and respond to it. I would like to move on and invite our next presenter. I will read the introduction in Ukrainian with your permission. So, пані Ганна Швець, фахівець у галузі лінгводидактики, літературознавець, педагог, кандидат.
A literary scholar, a teacher, candidate in philological science, graduated from Kiev Pedagogical University, used to teach in Kiev, and starting 2006 has been working at Kiev National University. And starting 2011, associate professor at the Department of Ukrainian and Russian Languages as Foreign. Starting 2022, associate professor of the Department of Philology for Foreigners. The scope of her scientific interest is methodology of Ukrainian language as a foreign language, linguodidactical, rethinking of fictional text, methodology of teaching Ukrainian language and literature in middle school. She is the author of multiple publications and handbooks that are dedicated to teaching Ukrainian language as a foreign one. Well, the floor is yours, Hannah. Good afternoon, colleagues. It is a pleasure for me to be here and share my experience. Can you all hear me well? Okay. Then let me start sharing my presentation, if I may. Just give me a second. Let me open it. And colleagues, Hannah, for some reason, I cannot hear you in Ukrainian language channel. You cannot hear my sound? Is that correct? We can hear you. Svetlana, can I continue? Hannah, we can hear you. I think that most people present at this meeting can hear you. I don't know which is the Ukrainian channel. Well, maybe. Hannah, could you please speak Ukrainian language channel? How do I do that? you have to click interpretation and find the Ukrainian language channel. So I have to click interpretation, right? I don't know, maybe this is only the problem on my side. How about now, Svetlana? Yes, I can hear you now. Oh, amazing, because it was in the English channel, that's why. I didn't know that it could impact a certain portion of our audience, sorry. And now everything is fine, you can hear me, right? Yes, we can hear you. Thank you so much. So colleagues, let us continue talking about the Ukrainian language. Well, I could have continued talking about it as a teacher of Ukrainian language, you know, especially for those who are working in private schools, who are teaching Ukrainian children who live abroad. But I'm going to share my other experience, the experience of teaching Ukrainian language as a foreign language. And I'm going to cover the topic of mental health in the course of Ukrainian as a foreign language. So what caused my interest in this topic, you may ask? Because I was trying to present it to other audiences, but I believe that any efficient class that is dedicated to Ukrainian language should be based on the relevant topic for your students, relevant content and text, and proper approaches. And I will today speak about the topic that I consider to be extremely relevant. So the purpose of this report is to justify the inclusion of mental health as a topic in the practical course of Ukrainian as a foreign language, UFL, and to outline a system of relevant educational texts and tasks for students at the advanced level of Ukrainian language proficiency. Can you see my slides moving? Amazing. Well, if we look at the state language standard, Ukrainian as a foreign language, the standard that has been approved recently, last fall to be more precise, and has been implemented officially into the learning process. And the topic of mental health and health is represented there. And obviously, this is the topic that is covered when students are reading any topic. When people are learning about parts of the body, well-being, medical conditions, and pharmacy, and gradually it expands to include more subjects. For example, at 8, we're talking about personal hygiene, visiting a doctor. B1 includes diagnostics, B2 emergency care, addictions, folk and traditional medicine, and C1 and C2 talks basically about the healthcare system and medical insurance. The topic of mental health was not exactly included among this list, but I believe that it deserves special attention. Why is that? Because it is interesting if you look at it from different perspectives. It's interesting on a global scale, it's interesting at the personal level and local level. What am I getting at? Well, currently a lot of attention is paid to mental health. And there are relevant global threats that pertain to mental health, regardless where we reside and what society we're a part of, due to environmental issues, due to society polarization, due to wars, and this is exactly what has been mentioned in the recent mental health report. When I'm talking about the importance of this topic in the personal, individual context, I think that each of us, one way or another, sometimes needs to exhale, relax, calm down because of the workload, too much information that is incoming from all the sources. And when during the class we're talking about the things that might be interesting to our students, It always conduces them to learn more, to analyze their own state and condition, makes the class more productive because they understand that it's not only useful from the language learning perspective, but also from the personal perspective. And talking about the national context, it is obvious that for Ukraine, specifically for the Ukrainian society that has been badly traumatized by the war, the topic of mental health and psychological aid is of utmost relevance. And if we discuss it with our language students, they will better understand what our life is like, how Ukrainians live every day, what Ukrainians go through emotionally, and they might look at the war context from a different angle. So I managed to focus on this topic when I was teaching at the summer language school. I went there to the annual international conference that is held in Germany, and it is organized by Grassfield University. The conference is the platform that brings together seminars on Ukrainian history, culture, societal life, different types of arts, and lectures of the leading Ukrainian scholars, experts from different areas of humanity, meetings with renowned Ukrainians and foreigners, and everything is happening in the English language. But for those who are willing to spend both half of the day, both morning and the afternoon, to learn in the language, they can join Ukrainian language course. But you know, there's very beautiful architecture in this town, a very nice nature. So we're trying to balance it so that we do not overburden our students. I was working with an older group of students. I mean the advanced students group. And as you can see, there were people who represent different age groups. And when talking to the students, I realized that they were worried about how can they balance the class in the morning, then the main conference agenda in the afternoon. Some people would be bringing up the family-related issues, you know, when we're just getting to know each other. The others were saying that they are about to defend their thesis, and this is something that's bothering them. And we all realized that we need to talk about mental health. And every time when I'm preparing for this, I'm bringing lots of materials with me because I understand that advanced students might be asking to focus not on something that I'm personally interested in or something that I prepared in advance, but something that is of interest to them. And we gradually started talking about that. We were sharing our concerns, and I believed we tried to do everything possible to engage in dialogue as much as possible to talk about personal things. In my monography, I am justifying the importance of this principle to teach any language as a foreign and Ukrainian language clearly. Now, talking about the structure of the class. For example, if we're taking this one that I have just covered, taking into account the proficiency level, I was working with the advanced level students. They needed authentic text, which we could analyze in a good, substantial way. We needed to pick the set of strategies for text processing and the methodology that is, among other things, psychologically comfortable because we were talking about mental health, right? So we needed to create a pleasant atmosphere. And if we're talking about terminology, then the learning text for me is any written or oral text, be it a text created on purpose or selected that is aimed at a certain group of students. But it is important to be analyzed and methodologically broken down by the teacher or the author of the textbook, depending on the learning goals. And such learning texts that I was selecting required linguistic and didactical analysis, which is applied to learning any language. And This linguistic and didactical analysis can be interpreted in various ways. I am relying on my research and research of my preliminaries. Basically, we're talking about various linguistic actions and activities that help us as the teachers to take any text and use it for our purposes. Basically, we have to analyze its potential and create tasks based on that text. In my thesis, I was talking about the linguodidactical analysis of the fictional text, and here you can see the 7 steps which I believe relevant for work with any kind of text. We have to select the text that is suitable for our students. If the need be, we can adapt it. And we should think whether there are any difficulties. In case it has to do with some country commentary or culture, we have to also prepare some additional materials. We have to analyze the vocabulary. We have to analyze the grammar. Clearly, we cannot explain all the grammar used in one text. But if there are some typical things that catch our attention, we can dedicate some time to that. Also, another thing is analysis of the text, stylistical analysis of the text, and an important thing for working with any group of students, but especially with advanced language learners, is the communication potential of the text, because we will be discussing this text. We'll be writing essays on the basis of this text. And here is the system of tasks. You can see 5 bullet points on this slide, and I think it's pretty exhaustive list for work with the text, but by no means I'm trying to say that you have to cover all of them during one class. This can be individual tasks and assignments that will require more time. 1 or 2 text assignments to the text that we're only overviewing. And now I would like to elaborate on how we did it in the context of mental health and psychological aid. What kind of text did I choose? For a detailed reading, as I have mentioned before, we offered to look at the Facebook post by Irina Tsilika. Basically, I found it 16 hours before our class with the student. And she mentioned that she went to see a psychiatrist, that she was depressed. And of course, the advanced language learners should be able to read the text from social media. And this is a well-known Ukrainian. Some even knew about her movies. Some heard about her for the first time. So we were reading this post from her Facebook page and we were discussing it. Then we also looked at a brochure that I accidentally saw in the hospital because I was hospitalized before going to Germany for this conference. And when I saw a face of a renowned Ukrainian singer, Nata Zhivchenko, I thought that it could be pretty interesting if I use it as a learning material. And this brochure is something that the students were working on in pairs at the beginning of the class. They were asking each other questions about the symptoms or pieces of advice that you can see in this brochure. So basically, we did the overview of it. This is the second page of this brochure, different exercises. And you know what? The funny thing is that all the students asked to keep these brochures because they wanted to take a closer look at them after the class. Also, aside from that, we were looking at the national mental health program from Ukraine. I presented it, and then every student analyzed one of the tabs on the website, and then they shared their impressions and shared what they have found out on the tab that they were working on. And another project titled, How Are You, Brother? Psychological piece of advice, handbooks on how to communicate with children amid war, how to talk to your lover, how to talk to the veterans. And this was also more of an overview. Everyone could pick one of the handbooks They could look through it and then present. And now let's talk about the assignments. Basically, I was sticking to those 5 bullet points that I mentioned. So the one that has to do with the country-specific information and culture. We were talking about Irina Tsilik as a director, but not Zhishchenko as a singer. Of course, when we were talking about the National Mental Health Program, we mentioned the First Lady, Olena Zelenska, Yulia Sanina, and we listened to a song by her that is called Yakti, How Are You, in English. This is a very touching song with very touching lyrics. Listen to it. Aside from that, we're looking about the Ukrainian project. Look for it. This is a project dedicated to going to Kyiv and looking for tiny sculptures that are scattered all across the city. And the recent one was installed recently, 2 check marks. You know, this is a symbol of the message that has been read. When you cannot get in touch with the person who is at the front line or who is far away from you, but finally you see that the message has been read and you exhale. Well, another type of task, it has to do with vocabulary. First and foremost, we were discussing the list of words at the beginning of the class, and also, we worked in pairs on the brochures and we were trying to figure out what the words mean. So we played a game. It is called World Wall. So you have to spin the wheel. You get the word stress, panic, depression, and the person should explain whether they have ever felt in this way. If they don't understand what the word means, we're trying to explain it. And aside from that, we're also trying to practice our grammar. For example, if I feel this and that, then that and that needs to be done. To calm down, to relax, to overcome stress, I need to do this and that and that. Basically, conditional sentences in Ukrainian language. And clearly, we are providing grammar commentary to the students. Now, the assignments that have to do with the content after we have read the text. Peer discussions, the entire group discussion when we're discussing what was written on the website, expressing personal position or opinion, and lingual stylistic. I have mentioned that we usually apply them when we're reading fictional texts, but we also use them here because, for example, on Irina Tsilik's Facebook post, there were lots of colloquialisms, but I believe that for advanced students, this is something that they should analyze and start learning step by step. So we also provided the commentary to this phrases, cool thing, I might break down soon, this is shite. And, you know, some dialects where students could try using them. It's not that they necessarily are going to use it, but so that they at least can understand it if someone uses it. And the lyrics of this song, Yakti, how are you? Wasn't that complicated, but still, nevertheless, we did the stylistic analysis because some of the phrases were pretty intricate. And the main assignment is communication on all stages. When we are discussing the meaning of the words in pairs, when students in pairs are having a dialogue about their psychological condition and state, and then they were sharing about it with their group, discussing pieces of advice found in the brochure. They also were presenting what they have read on the website. Also, we did modeling a possible dialogue between Irina Tsilik and the psychiatrist that she came to see as a client. And of course, we did some written assignments because clearly this is only for those who wanted to write an essay dedicated to advices on supporting person's mental health. Basically, my main conclusions are the following. First, this topic matters. We should work on it. It's interesting because it is very clear to people at the individual level, and It is a very cute topic in the Ukrainian context as well. If we're working with the advanced students, then I believe that it is important to highlight that we need to use diverse types of educational texts. Of course, it's going to be something interesting, something fresh, something up to date, because in the present day context, textbook is something that is very much needed at the beginner's level, but if it's an advanced student, you need some new texts, new topics every day. Also, it is important to combine different texts and different types of reading them. We have to alternate different types of activities and different types of assignments. We have to integrate all forms of speech activity. And of course, we have to take into account the psychological characteristics of the group. Of course, the students after working on such topic are going to be happy. And my experience proves that. But, whenever we are teaching someone foreign language, it needs to be psychologically comfortable and pleasant. And we, as the teachers, should strive for that.
Thank you very much for such a fascinating presentation. Thank you very much for this highly relevant topic. I would like to call on all our speakers to stick to the 15-minute time limit. Unfortunately, we are a bit behind the schedule. I am sending you messages in our chat reminding you about the time. Please pay attention to those. Oh, yes, I see it now. I'm sorry. I was carried away with my presentation. I'm doing my best not to interrupt anyone, but I wanted to give the space for everyone to speak up. And now I would like to give the floor to our next speaker.
Created by Russia's war in Ukraine. Natalia Olinik holds a PhD in philology, is an associate professor at the Department of Business and Foreign Language and Translation at the Vasily Karazin National University of Kharkiv. Her dissertation focused on the historical cognitive analysis of the concept of economic crisis in English economic discourse and its metaphoric potential during the global crises of the 1930s and 2000s. Her research interests include cognitive and ecolinguistics. Currently, she's studying discursive practices in Ukraine's cultural heritage, particularly the deconstruction of colonial influence in the language of communication. And the title of their presentation is Deconstructing Colonial Influences. Thank you, and please welcome.
Дякую, пані Романе, і наші з Наталією вітання усім шановним колегам. Я тільки хочу попросити пані Наталю, якщо можна збільшити...
To ask Natalia to zoom in on our slides. I would like to see them full screen. Well, actually, I see them full screen. Dear colleagues, what do you think about this presentation? Would you prefer to see the slides full screen? Always see the view with the rest of the slides. Oh, just a second. And I would like to see this opportunity, and I would like to express our gratitude to the organizers. What about now? Well, no. All right, let's just leave it this way. I'll give it a try. Just another try. Apologies. And now we cannot see anything. like to share our reflections on the role of cultural heritage practices in preserving and strengthening Ukrainian national identity, particularly during Russia's war against Ukraine. Today, we would like to define the key notions. These and definitions include Ukrainian nation, national identity, and cultural heritage. And then we will switch to the analysis of the materials. Well, first of all, nation. And nation has a number of definitions. And here we would like to quote Benedict Anderson. In his work Imagined Communities, he defines nation as a social construct, meaning community that is perceived by a number of people as the community they belong to. And following this logic, Ukrainians are an imaginary community, but at the same time, Russians, French, Germans are also imaginary communities. And yet, there are certain grounds that allow us to speak about one nation as a nation. They need to share traditions, they need to share customs, they need to share symbols and rituals, and they also need to have a common economy, territorial connections, and historic narratives. The Ukrainian language plays a crucial role as a foundation for the nation. It is the backbone of our identity. And the Ukrainian language is taught and passed on through generations despite the circumstances, as we saw it today, presented earlier. This is the language of intercultural communication, and this is the fact that helps us to shape our vision of ourselves as a nation. Today, we will talk about the discourse of Shevchenko's heritage. In the Ukrainian language, word heritage has a number of definitions. Those include tangible and intangible properties that are passed on to the heirs from the deceased persons, or these are the phenomena of culture, works of culture, science that remain from the old times. Another definition is that these are properties that have great value. And we also have another definition to share. That is the definition from the Oxford Dictionary. And their heritage is defined as that which has been or may be inherited. Any property, especially land, that which devolves by right of inheritance. We see that there was a change in this definition since it was extended, and now it covers not only individual property but also the properties that have the comprehensive universal value. And today, the main meaning of the World Heritage is something that is tangible, something that could be passed on from generation to generation. And yet, intangible heritage is more important from the point of view of our perception of our identity, meaning language, culture, literature, as intangible heritage helps us to build a common memory, collective social memory. And you see the list of intangible heritage, language, literature, songs. We use the heritage in order to shape, to have the impression of the future, but also to make projections for the future. According to Robert Hewson in his The Heritage Industry, the impulse to preserve the past is part of the impulse to preserve the self. Without knowing where we have been, it is difficult to know where we are going. And now let's take a look at some examples of the use of Shevchenko's heritage. And And sometimes it is used for manipulation and propaganda. It is well known that Russian sources often present Shevchenko as a Russian poet, suggesting that this figure belongs to Russian cultural heritage. We have identified two key aspects that support this hostile narrative. Um, it is based on his biography, the geographical criterion and linguistic criterion, since Shevchenko was born in Ukraine but lived also in the Russian Empire, and linguistic criterion, he wrote both in the Ukrainian and the Russian languages. And he was closely connected to his Ukrainian roots. And if we go to RU expert website, we see that Shevchenko is referred to as a Russian language prose writer and a great poet of Ukraine, focusing on his use of Russian in his writing. And we see that in Great Russian Encyclopedia, Shevchenko is described as Ukrainian poet who wrote in Russian and Ukrainian. We believe that Shevchenko's thinking was shaped by various languages depending on his surrounding. He was a multilingual personality, but his ideas remained clearly Ukrainian, as well as his mother tongue. If we go to Ukraina.ru website, Shevchenko is called a Ukrainian genius, although it is offered as a quote, and it means that uh, they are implying that he belongs to the Russian culture since he was born in Kyiv province, and back in the days it was part of the Russian Empire. This illustrates how Shevchenko's biography is utilized as a source of facts, and sometimes the actual values and his views were not taken into due consideration. And now I would like to pass the floor to Natalia. Thank you, Elena. I will try to keep the track of the time. I would like to offer just a couple of examples. And now I would like to show you the articles that are uh, making references to his innocent memories of the past when he wanted to look for the horizon when he was 6 years old. This a place where the sky rests on the ground. And somehow, the author of this article, with the inherent generosity of Russia as the cradle of Shevchenko's talent, uh, and draws an unexpected conclusion addressing the poet respectfully. You have reached the horizon, Taras Grigorovich, where Ukraine meets Russia, and this is a very bright page in our common history. Using this metaphor of the country and the earth, or the earth meaning Russia and the country and the sky, Ukraine, the author assigns special symbolism to the idea of unity, e- equating it to the harmonious merger of the two elements. Earth here symbolizes stability, reality, history, culture, traditions, and heaven, and the sky, freedom, aspiration, inspiration, and imagination. And we see that this is the metaphor of this merger of earth and the sky only underscores the willingness of Russia to be united with Ukraine, and Ukraine seems to be a foolish neighbor lost in the clouds, with the head in the clouds. And now I would like to take a look at the monument to Shevchenko in occupied Crimea. I would like to say that these monuments are actually preserved. They are not being destroyed, and they are used for the Russian propaganda. The notion of a shared history and the unity of the Ukrainian and Russian peoples. Shevchenko is not presented as a poet who fought for Ukraine's freedom, but rather as a supporter of the colonization of Ukraine by Russia. And furthermore, there are distorted forms of honoring his memory. For instance, during the celebration of Shevchenko's birthday in Crimea, his songs, based on his lyrics, are sung, but they are sung in Russian. Besides, pseudo-folk costumes are worn instead of traditional embroidered shirts with specific regional symbols. Identical shirts with bright red flowers appear, and they have no connection to authentic Ukrainian folk costumes. Another example is the celebration in Simferopol on the 9th of March 2018. Shevchenko and Yuri Gagarin were born on the same day, and there was a celebration of their birthday with the participation of the Russian, Ukrainian, and Belarusian communities of Crimea. The main message of the event was as follows. It is noteworthy that on this day, two people were born whose names make the entire Slavic world proud, Ukrainian Taras Shevchenko and Russian Yuri Gagarin. And now a few quotes from the speech of Russian propagandist Anastasia Girchina. She said that Taras Shevchenko called for peace and friendship with Russia and Russians. He didn't see any other future for Ukraine, and neither do Ukrainians living in Crimea. She also states that if we often open the Kobzar, we will see that he wrote that the Slavs are one people. Shevchenko was never a Russophobe. He loved his homeland. And we see that the Shevchenko's monuments in Crimea are not a sign of respect for Ukrainian culture. They serve as a tool of ideological colonization, and are symbols of the Russian narrative of unity and common history. And now I would like to offer an example of Balaklia. Here you see the billboards that contain the quotes of Shevchenko. They were installed before the full-scale invasion in August 2022. They were hung there on the eve of Ukraine's independence, and during the occupation of Balaklia, the Russians covered up the banner with Shevchenko lines and replaced it with a poster that carried the Russian slogans, claiming that Ukraine and Russia are one country. And only when it was liberated, Ukrainian defenders removed those Russian slogans. And now I would like to bring us to Kharkiv, as Kharkiv is Elena's and my hometown. There is a monument to Shevchenko in Kharkiv. It was erected in 1935. It is quite particular since it is 11 meters high, and it is encircled by a dynamic spiral of 16 sculptures. This place is very important for the citizens of Kharkiv. We got together there during the Maidan events, and we get together around this monument for various commemorations. As for us, this monument is a symbol of invincibility and resilience and defiance of Kharkiv. It is worth mentioning that the story of the preservation of this monument is special and dear to the heart of Kharkiv citizens. During World War II, citizens of Kharkiv didn't allow to blow up this monument, and now during the full-scale invasion, this monument is protected by the bags with sand. And this year, on the 90th anniversary of the monument, it was protected from shelling and adorned with a poster bearing a quote from Kobzar. And additionally, there is a flag with the names of the fallen defenders of Ukraine. And my last example, the conversion from Lenin to Shevchenko. In the village of Katlarka in Zhytomyr region, the local residents decided not to demolish the monument to Lenin, but to convert it to the monument to Shevchenko. According to the local head of culture department, they opted for such a transition due to the lack of funds, as the demolishing would strip them of the funds to erect a new monument. That is why the local artists transformed Lenin's monument into Shevchenko. The cap was turned into a collection of Shevchenko's poem, and Lenin's jacket was turned into a long cloak, mimicking Shevchenko's iconic look. And I was wondering about your opinion, since yesterday we were talking about aesthetics. Uh, do you think such transformations are acceptable or not? I would like to hear from you. This case illustrates that every tangible heritage object is connected to intangible heritage through the language used to describe it, its role in social practices, and the impact of subsequent changes. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much for this presentation about resistance, decolonization, the resistance that Ukraine continues still. Well, sadly, we don't have that much time, but I will be the last one to speak, and I'll try to speed up to share the information that I have prepared for you so that we can also have some time to take questions. Can you see my slides on the screen? Yes. If I may, I will now switch to the English language.
I thought I used successfully. I would like to explain the reasons why this question was important to me. There are two kinds of reasons. Some are administrative and miscellaneous. The other ones are pedagogical. So I started thinking about this problem of finding effective, authentic video materials for my Ukrainian classes when COVID started because of the need to shift the instruction online. But today, there's also other pressures like low enrollments in North American institutions. These classes are always threatened. The Ukrainian classes are being canceled because of poor numbers. And also this kind of push to, redesign Ukrainian courses as hybrid or asynchronous courses. I would imagine that everybody understands what I'm talking about, so I will not elaborate on this. More importantly, my pedagogical reasons were that, if I manage to find good, authentic video materials, they're always engaging, they create a fun learning environment, they fit well with the communicative language teaching paradigm. And by communicative language teaching, I mean that, the content that the students are exposed to is relevant. They find it useful. It's relevant to real life. These materials will allow me to present grammar in context rather than just kind of feeding them the rules and doing the mind-numbing drills. It allows to foster culture, creativity, and critical thinking in addition to the four linguistic skills. Of course, other pedagogical reasons like cultivating an independent learner were extremely important, simulating the immersion environment and so on, maximizing time on task. In other words, creating as many possibilities for students to be exposed to language as possible. And also, I believe that, finding these and using these authentic video materials would work well in a so-called flipped classroom. It's a strange concept in English and even stranger in Ukrainian перевернутий class. There's nothing that's upside down in this class. It's just that the expectation is that students do the heavy lifting at home, that they perform all the preparatory tasks at home. They work on vocabulary, they work on grammar, so that in class, the focus can be on discussion and more communicative, more productive rather than receptive activities. Some important caveats that I considered when looking for these materials were continuity, consistency, and scaffolding. In other words, there's a plethora. There's probably a million different videos that you can find online these days that would be fitting to the language classroom. However, in my case, the problem was not so much like finding anything, but finding something that could be used throughout the entire semester and something that would allow me to build on skills rather than just kind of watch random videos. The second and probably the most important caveat was to find materials that would be possible to would fit well. The scaffolding idea would be possible for the students to work on at home. And by that I meant, like, in literature, oftentimes we use parallel language corpora or parallel, side-by-side texts where, you see the text in Ukrainian, but also you have the English translation. What was extremely important for me in this case was to make sure that these videos either come with subtitles or preferably that they are dubbed. So in other words, that there's Ukrainian voiceover. And finally, the challenge was, for them to be authentic, but also appropriate for all the levels. And I taught beginner Ukrainian, intermediate Ukrainian, but also heritage or advanced Ukrainian. And here's the examples of what I found. So for introductory Ukrainian, I use Svinka Peppa, which is a fantastic British cartoon covering all sorts of life situations, of course, from the perspective of a 4 or 5-year-old. But for beginners Ukrainian, this was very easy. And most importantly, students could, if they were lost, they could watch these episodes in English and then watch them in Ukrainian and feel much more comfortable. For intermediate Ukrainian, I use Dora Mandrivnitsa, Dora the Explorer. And for my heritage Ukrainian, I used the HBO Chernobyl series, and we watched all the 5 episodes. I will probably not talk a lot about how I adapted them to the classroom. In this case, my presentation echoes what Pani Hanna Shveds already explained about adapting those materials and working on activities and exercises that accompany them. But right now, my focus is primarily on like finding something authentic that would be, that I would be able to use throughout the entire semester. So let me jump to challenges and benefits really quickly. Some of the challenges that I faced were, of course, copyright. And, this is one topic that I'm still kind of uncomfortable with because copyright is extremely problematic. But more importantly, I would like to move on to the last 2 bullet points, which is creation of materials and adapting, these authentic cartoons to the classroom and to different proficiency levels. Most importantly, the challenge that I'm still trying to cope with is assessment and testing. So in addition to creating those materials and vocabulary on grammar, communicative tasks, discussion prompts, testing, how students improve after watching these cartoons or these videos or these films remains an issue. But the benefits to me still outweigh the challenges. I found these materials extremely effective because students were engaged and very enthusiastic about it. Sometimes I joke that, I choose these cartoons because my 5-year-old watches them at home. But students were receptive to it and they were very engaged before class and during class, of course. I already spoke about how these are like real life and relevant topics, especially like Peppa Pig. All sorts of daily situations that would otherwise be presented in the textbook were covered in the cartoon. And finally, these video materials allowed me to integrate all the linguistic skills, including reading and writing and discussion, but also incorporate culture, present grammar and context, work on vocabulary, and so forth. And finally, they're outstanding for historicizing, contextualizing, and problematizing. If students perform these tasks well, the linguistic tasks well, we move on to the discussion and then also learn how to talk about other topics that go beyond the cartoons or the films. Finally, going forward, my idea is to maybe start thinking about these cartoons, specifically Peppa Pig and Dora, and also the Chernobyl series, developing them into mini courses or interactive resources that would be housed by the International Association of Teachers of Ukrainian, and so that they could become open access and could be used by the global community of Ukrainian teachers, but also by anybody who's interested to study Ukrainian independently. And with this, I will probably close, hoping that this saves us some time and gives us at least 10 minutes for discussion. Thank you. So I would now like to open the floor. Let me scroll back up and see if there's any questions in the chat already. I know that there was one question to Pani Marina. I'm trying to find this. Yeah, so a question from Martha Nikos. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, but the question reads, Marina, thank you for this important research on child language maintenance. Yes, children retain Ukrainian, but what is the quality of their language proficiency? Are they limited to daily kitchen language, or can they communicate at the level of their cognitive development, say teenage or young adult language proficiency? This is a huge challenge for parents and teachers everywhere. And then Pani Marina already responded, I think, but maybe you would like to just say this briefly.
Thank you so much for the question. Quality depends on the efforts parents and children put into actions to support maintaining Ukrainian. And if children just speak at home in Ukrainian but are not involved in Ukrainian language classes online or other classes in Ukrainian, their proficiency will be limited to kitchen language, or say another word, as my 19 years old participant called language of mothers, cutlets. And if they continue attending online classes in Ukrainian more hours, better proficiency, in average it is 6-10 hours per week, plus do some homework, they will be probably able to communicate at the level of their cognitive development. And as I mentioned in my presentation, we held linguistic experiments such as bilingual picture naming task and semantic and philological verbal fluency task and story retelling task through stories in both Ukrainian and English. And after analyzing this data, we will be able to understand to what extent children's Ukrainian proficiency has been affected in comparison with English and what the quality of that language proficiency is.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? We have about 6 minutes left. Any other questions for our presenters? If there's no questions,
Maybe some comments.
Yeah, I would
Okay.
like to ask. As I was listening, I was actually also preparing a few questions. For Pani Marina, thank you for a wonderful presentation. It's extremely important because, as I jokingly referred to this, for children of immigrants or children of refugees, the concept of mother tongue transforms or transmutes into the concept of daycare tongue. Because for a kid, the tongue that the language that they speak with their peers at daycare or at kindergarten or in elementary school almost becomes more important than the language that is spoken at home. And so you spoke very eloquently about all of these initiatives and the things that Ukrainians can do to maintain Ukrainian despite the environment. The question would be, what is being done? Like, is there a possibility for networks? Because in the United States and the UK especially, in the United States, it all comes down to like Sunday schools, Saturday schools. Like it's a community that revolves around the church. What other ideas are circulating in the UK by the refugee and immigrant communities to create those circles of exposure for the kids?
As I'm mother of 10 years old boy, and all research based on my experience. First, that research started, my academic mentor, Professor Monica Schmick, sent me that books, frog stories, and I tried to ask my son to tell me the story. And already it was maybe half year that we were in the UK. And when he recalled the story in English, he was fluent, he was happy, no pauses. But when he started to tell me the story in Ukrainian, there was very big pauses, and he even forgets some words, in particular, vidro, bucket. So in our reality, there wasn't any, there weren't any bucket, and he forgot that words. And in that moment, I realized I made the video and I sent to Monica, and she mentioned, look, I think, and Monica, she is a leading expert in the world who works with language iteration. And she mentioned, look, I think all Ukrainian children will face the same.
Right.
So, and what I did with my child, first we, so at home we speak just Ukrainian. It is not accept to speak in English first. Next, all online classes has been decreased up to 10 hours per week. So he has 10 hours per week. Ukrainian, math in Ukrainian, history of Ukraine, folklore, different classes. And after that, I realized that he can't to understand we watch Mavka in the cinema. And first we watch it in English, and after that we watch it in Ukrainian. And he mentioned that I like English version more, and I was shocked. And I realized that he is more easily can pick up English words than Ukrainian. And after that, I sign up to the Mehuho in Ukrainian, and he watched some videos, movies just in Ukrainian. So in my opinion, what we need to do, we have beautiful private schools who offered in Ukraine, who offered online classes for children. It could be the problem with the US because of the difference of the time. But in Europe, it is easy to get access to the classes and to extend attending online classes up to 10 years hours.
Yeah. Thank you. Any other questions for other participants of the roundtable, please? I had a quick question. We have like 1 minute remaining. I had a quick question for Pani Hanna Shved. So thank you for a wonderful presentation. You spoke very eloquently about working on materials and specifically working on text and adapting them. Could you tell us a little more about the productive skills? Because texts and videos, like in my own case, you know, watching a video or listening to a recording, these are receptive listening or reading skills. How did your students do, especially on the topic of psychological health? How did they do when it came to talking about it more actively, like not just reading about somebody else's problems, but describing their own problems? Thank you.
Ми говоримо в парах, передусім.
We work in pairs. And the students are very happy to do that. And the material that I use are very helpful. I say, so here are some things that are described in the brochure and pieces of advice. So can you share it? Would you use this advice? And then talk. And then in a group, everyone can share the experience of their peer. The person told me about this and that, and this is how they relied on this advice. So this topic is very good because students want to share. They want to share what they felt, how they felt. And I am trying to use this personal interest so that they can share their feelings. But again, I was working with the advanced group. So they have the relevant skill, but even at the elementary, at the beginner level, if you help them with the dialogue, you create the conducive environment, it's gonna work. It's gonna work, they'll speak. Thank you so much. And I would like to thank Natalia and Olena, our final presenters, for speaking about how Ukrainians are trying to decolonize, but what challenges they're faced with, especially in the occupied territories, and presented about Taras Shevchenko. Sadly, we do not have any more time. Our time is up, and let us be respectful to the next panel participants. I would like to express the heartfelt gratitude to everyone for amazing presentations, for being here with us, for the attention from our audience, taking care of Ukrainian language and culture. I'd like to wish you all the best.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Roman. Thank you to all the panelists for this really wonderful panel about language maintenance. It's so important. I will stop the recording of this particular session and start a new one.